Pre is cooking up something crazy, and I am here for it, picking up several proven, highly sought-after talent for a team that has historically been seen as a bit of a joke in the last 4 years or so. We'll start with the DPS line. They signed Decay, Striker, and Birdering as their DPS trio for the year. This is a kinda stacked DPS line. Striker is coming off of a great playoff run with a shock, showing off his elite Reaper and still having good showings on the Tracer throughout the season. Decay has been putting the justice on his back for the past few seasons, being absolutely dominant on the Tracer, Sojourn, Zarya, and even showing good other hit scans and a decent Genji. Birdering has been away from the game for a while, but when he was in, he was a dominant hit scan, being very good and flexible in all those picks, and proving he still has a very good Sojourn in the recent Legends show match. But what if they have to play Echo? Jokes aside, this is a high potential, but on average, I think this lineup isn't amazing. It really depends how much faith you put into Decay as a hyperflex. His Genji is alright, but nothing crazy, and he hasn't really shown he can play Echo or Pharah to a high level. The common argument is that really the only meta-relevant flex DPS are Genji and Echo, and I agree with that to an extent. Those are still very glaring holes in this roster. I'd rather have seen them pick up someone like, say, Top Dragon, Spectre, maybe Alpha Yi instead of Birdering or Striker. Decay also just generally looks more comfortable in the Tracer hit scan role. He looked his best last year when he could just focus on the Sojourn and Tracer. But in any sort of hit scan and Tracer, Reaper, or Sombra meta, these guys will fuck. I give these guys a 7 out of 10 DPS line. Lacking in flexibility, but definitely not in star power, and should be good in most metas. Let's just hope there isn't a Genji carry meta. Next up, the tank line. They picked up tank role star Smurf from the Seoul Dynasty, who received a lot of praise for his solo tank play, and Kalios coming off of a solid season with the Justice. Smurf is obviously an absolutely incredible tank. He was able to keep up with the team through multiple metas, playing basically every tank the game has to offer to a high level. He's arguably the best tank in the game at the moment, and frankly, certainly the most valuable. Him alone is enough to make this a fantastic tank line, but the inclusion of Kalios, who brings a very solid D.Va and Orisa, which are basically the two heroes that Smurf was lacking on, fills out this tank line perfectly. This is basically as good as you can get in terms of tank line. These two cover the entirety of the tank role to a really high level, and should help bring out the strengths of both of these guys. Insanely good tank line. If there are only any qualms, it's that I wasn't particularly impressed with Kalios. He does cover that D.Va Orisa niche that Smurf doesn't really play. I don't think he was particularly great at those heroes though, and Smurf could always learn. But this is a very strong tank line, expected to be one of the stronger ones in the league. But another issue I have with it is that outside of Smurf's Winston and Zarya, the tank's tank gameplay isn't really S tier, if that makes sense. Kalios was not super impressive to me, and Smurf's Striker Queen and Wrecking Ball leave a little bit to be desired. But nonetheless, I'm expecting this to be a fantastic tank line, 9 out of 10. Finally, the supports. We got Boston sniping the entire Shanghai support line. Lee Jae-gon and Rollstar Izayaki, as well as Twilight from the Toronto Defiant. This is a fantastic support line. It's maybe the best part of the roster. Izayaki is a role star, despite all his doubters, and brings an S-tier Zenyatta and fantastic Ana and Brig. And obviously has a ton of synergy with Lee Jae-gon, who is coming off of a down, it's still very impressive year. Really solid support line already, but the addition of Twilight, who covers the BAP and Moira weaknesses, and has an even better Ana than Izayaki, makes the support line a really well-rounded, and makes these guys deadly in a double flex support meta. I'll give these guys a 9 or maybe even 10 out of 10. Izayaki and Lee Jae-gon weren't incredible like usual, but Shanghai had a lot of other struggles, and they were undeniably above average. Then Twilight was quietly one of the best flex supports on a middling team. If Lee Jae-gon and Izayaki prove to be S tier again, these guys are competing for best support line in the league. Finally, the coaching staff. Seemingly their only coach is their head coach Dongsu, coming back from a break here after being a coach for Shanghai in 2020 and 2021. Obviously a really solid coach. I remember a lot of people wondering where this dude was and begging their team to pick him up last year. But overall, I think this is a really solid roster. I do have some concerns though. Obviously, amazing tank and support lines, but the lack of flexibility in the DPS line hurts them, considering DPS is the most valuable role in the game. They lack S-tier pieces across a lot of metas, and Lee Jae-gon and Izayaki had a bit of a down year, but it's clear these guys are all still hungry for a championship. On paper, this is an extremely good team, but on the other side of the argument is that this team is guys who've been around since the dawn of time. I mean, for fuck's sake, the youngest dude here is Lee Jae-gon, who is going on his 4th year in the league. The team is relying on these guys to maintain their peaks, and their growth potential is low. However, I do think these guys should be a top 5 team by the end of the season. And I see them making a stage final and possibly even taking a stage in the right meta. These guys are that good. I'm rooting for this team. Despite my doubts, they're going to be insanely fun to watch. Thanks for watching.